Emily had always considered herself lucky. At 29, she had finally saved enough to buy her own small home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't big, but it was cozy, with 2 bedrooms, a living room, and an attic that creaked whenever the wind was strong. She told herself those noises were just part of the charm. But late one winter evening, she would learn that some sounds weren't so innocent. Emily was curled up on the couch grading her students' essays. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. She was used to the noises of the house by now, but at 11:30 p.m. she froze. Above her, on the second floor, came a sound she couldn't dismiss. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, like someone pacing the hallway. She set down her pen, her heart hammering. She lived alone. At first, she tried to convince herself it was her imagination. Maybe the old house shifting, maybe the branches scraping against the roof. But then she heard it again. Step, step, step. Someone was definitely walking upstairs. Emily reached for her phone with trembling hands. She didn't call 911 right away. Instead, she opened the voice recorder app, whispering into it, "There's someone in my house." She wanted evidence in case she was being paranoid. As if on cue, the footsteps stopped. Silence stretched across the house, so thick she could hear her own heartbeat. Then, with a groan that echoed down the stairwell, the first step creaked. Someone was coming down. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She bolted up, snatched her keys, and fled out the back door into the freezing night. In her slippers, she ran to her neighbor's house, pounding frantically until they let her in. Minutes later, the police arrived. Flashlights swept through the rooms. Doors were checked, windows examined. Nothing. No broken locks, no forced entry. The house was empty. Emily felt foolish, but one of the officers handed her phone back. "You said you recorded something?" he asked. She nodded, her hands still trembling. She pressed play. First came her whisper, shaky and low, "There's someone in my house." And then, clear as day, a man's voice from upstairs. Calm, cold. "I know." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They searched again, this time checking every closet, every crawl space. But no one was found. That night, Emily stayed at her neighbor's house, unable to step foot back inside. Later, when she gathered the courage to return, she noticed something she hadn't before. On the dusty floor of the attic, faint footprints led from one side to the other. They stopped directly above where she had been sitting on the couch. Sometimes the scariest part of living alone is realizing you're not. Jake lived in a small rental house just outside of town. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but the rent was cheap, and for a single guy in his 20s trying to save money, that mattered more than safety. He had gotten used to the occasional sound of distant sirens, barking dogs, and the creak of the old fence out back. One rainy Friday night, Jake was at home playing video games. It was just past midnight, and the storm outside was picking up. Heavy rain pounded against the roof, and thunder rolled across the sky. He had his headset on, chatting with friends online, when something caught his attention. A noise. At first, he thought it was just part of the storm. But then it came again, 3 sharp taps. Not from the front door, but from the back. He pulled his headset off, sitting up straighter. The back door was in the kitchen, with a small window beside it that looked out onto the yard. He muted the TV and listened. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking. Jake's stomach tightened. It was nearly 12:30 a.m. Who would be at his back door in the middle of a storm? He stood slowly, his bare feet cold against the wooden floor, and walked toward the kitchen. The knock stopped. He waited, the house silent except for the rain. He almost convinced himself it was his imagination when suddenly, a voice broke through the storm. "Hey man, let me in." Jake froze. The voice was male, low, and muffled through the door. He didn't recognize it. "Who's there?" Jake called back, trying to sound confident. No answer. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and slowly approached the window. Pulling the curtain back just slightly, he peeked outside. A man was standing there, drenched from the rain, his hood pulled over his head. He was leaning close to the glass, grinning. Jake's blood went cold. The man raised a hand and waved slowly, as if mocking him. Then, in a sing-song voice, he said, "I know you're home." Jake stumbled back, his heart hammering. He ran to the front door, checking that it was locked, then rushed to the hallway window, peeking through the blinds. The man was no longer at the back door. Jake dialed 911 with trembling hands. He whispered into the phone, explaining that someone was trying to get into his house. The operator told him to stay on the line and hide somewhere safe. But before he could move, a new sound cut through the storm. The back doorknob was rattling, slowly at first, then harder. The man was trying to force it open. Jake crouched behind the couch in the living room, clutching the knife and whispering updates to the dispatcher. His whole body shook as the rattling grew louder, more desperate. Then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. He strained to listen, every second dragging on like an eternity. The dispatcher's calm voice in his ear was the only thing keeping him from breaking down completely. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house. Not from the back door this time, but from the side window near the kitchen. Jake bit down on his lip to stop himself from making a sound. He couldn't see the man anymore, but he knew he was still out there. Moments later, red and blue lights flashed across the curtains. Police cars screeched into the driveway. Officers flooded the yard, searching with flashlights. Jake finally exhaled, tears welling in his eyes. He stayed hidden until an officer knocked at the front door, announcing themselves. The man was gone. All they found were muddy footprints around the house, circling it more than once. The trail led to the woods at the edge of the property and vanished. That night, Jake didn't go back to sleep. He never stayed another night in that house either. Within a week, he had broken his lease and moved out, losing his deposit but gaining his peace of mind. Some knocks aren't meant to be answered, and sometimes the ones knocking don't plan on leaving. Sarah was a light sleeper. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the windows could wake her up. Living alone in a two-bedroom apartment on the second floor didn't help. She always double-checked the locks before bed, making sure every door and window was secure. But one night in early autumn, she would realize that sometimes locks aren't enough. It was just after 2 a.m. when Sarah woke to a sound that didn't belong. At first, she thought it was part of a dream, but when she sat up in bed, she heard it clearly. A soft click, like the faint sound of a door being closed. Her apartment was quiet, the kind of silence where every little noise seemed magnified. She strained her ears. Then came another sound, the slow, steady creak of a floorboard just outside her bedroom door. Her chest tightened. She lived alone. Sarah's phone was on the nightstand. Her hand shook as she grabbed it and opened the flashlight app. She pointed it at the door, her breath caught in her throat. The knob began to turn. She froze, her entire body stiff. The door didn't swing open all the way, but it moved just enough for her to see the dark outline of someone standing in the hallway. "Who's there?" she shouted, trying to sound braver than she felt. The figure didn't answer. They just stood there, motionless. She scrambled for her phone again, this time dialing 911, whispering to the operator that someone was inside her apartment. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line, stay quiet, and hide. Her closet was small, barely big enough to squeeze into, but she slipped inside, pulling the door shut. The dispatcher's voice was calm in her ear as she whispered updates. From inside the closet, Sarah could hear everything. The slow creak of footsteps crossing her bedroom floor, the sound of someone breathing heavily. Then, the edge of the bed groaning as the intruder sat down. Her heart pounded so hard she worried the stranger would hear it. Minutes dragged by like hours. She kept the phone pressed tight to her ear, whispering through tears as the dispatcher reassured her that help was on the way. Then suddenly silence. The breathing stopped. The bed creaked again, as if the intruder had stood up. And then, in a voice low and rasping, the stranger spoke. "I know you're in there." Sarah clamped a hand over her mouth to stop a scream from escaping. The sound of footsteps approached the closet. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then stopped. Red and blue lights flooded the room through the blinds. Police sirens wailed outside. There was a crash, the sound of footsteps pounding down the hallway, then the front door slamming open. Officers rushed inside, their shouts filling the apartment. Sarah burst out of the closet, sobbing, pointing toward the hallway. But it was too late. The intruder was gone. The police searched the building, then the surrounding streets, but they never found anyone. What they did find chilled Sarah to her core. The lock on her sliding balcony door had been tampered with. That's how the intruder had gotten in. The worst part? Sarah's apartment was on the second floor. Whoever had come in that night had climbed up to reach her balcony and let themselves inside. Sarah moved out within days, never spending another night there. But even in her new apartment, she still wakes sometimes at 2 a.m., convinced she can hear the soft click of a door closing. When the intruder knows you're awake, hiding doesn't feel like safety anymore. It feels like waiting.